dust motes dance through shafts of ruby light within Blackfriars, where the scent of aged beeswax and parchment hangs heavy over a silent gallery of predatory lords. Here, Catherine of Aragon, a storm of iron and sorrow, kneels upon cold flagstones before the man who would discard her. Her husband, a golden lion pacing his gilded cage of desire, watches as the queen becomes a steady anchor in a sea of rising treason. The court holds its breath, a single heartbeat, before the crash of history. Every gaze is a blade, every whisper a poison, as the very foundation of the English crown begins now. Before we begin, if you enjoy these late-night deep dives into history's darkest corners, take a second to subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing our little community scattered across time zones, all drawn to the same shadows. The air inside Blackfriars is a stagnant soup of unwashed wool, melting beeswax, and the metallic tang of fear. Henry VIII stands as a colossal predator, his chest heaving under embroidered silk, a storm trapped in a doublet. Beside him, Cardinal Campeggio is a slow-ticking clock of Roman delay, his withered hands trembling as he prepares to adjourn the court without a verdict. This is the fragile heartbeat of a kingdom, the moment where the great matter reaches its boiling point. The factions of the court, the Boleyn supporters and the traditionalists, circle one another like silent wolves in a gilded forest, their eyes fixed on the king's darkening visage. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors are flung open with a violence that echoes like a thunderclap. A messenger, his face a mask of exhaustion and his garments caked in the salt crust of the Channel, stumbles toward the dais. He carries a lead-sealed cylinder that feels heavier than gold. As the king snatches the document, the room falls into a silence so profound it seems to erase the sound of the Thames outside. The parchment unfurls with a dry, reptilian hiss. It is not merely a summons to Rome. It is a papal bull of excommunication, paired with a frantic missive from the imperial ambassador. The shadow of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor and Catherine's nephew, has finally elongated across the sea. A credible, terrifying threat of invasion is articulated with cold, Habsburg precision, a crusade of all Europe against a lone, heretical island. In this pivot point, the predator is transformed into prey. Henry looks at Catherine, who remains an immovable anchor of iron and prayer on the floor. He sees not just a wife he wishes to discard, but the aunt of the man whose armies could turn London into a funeral pyre. The tectonic shift occurs in the king's eyes, the heat of his lust for, and is instantly cooled by the glacial reality of political annihilation. To proceed with the annulment is to commit a biological gamble that the Tudor line could survive a continental onslaught, a gamble he suddenly lacks the stomach to take. The king's resolve shatters with the fragility of thin ice. In a public display that stuns the gathered lords, Henry does not shout in defiance. Instead, he descends from his throne, his movements heavy and deliberate, and sinks to his knees beside his queen. The act is the eraser of the world we know. By reaching out to take Catherine's hand, he pulls the English crown back from the precipice of schism. He publicly reaffirms his marriage vows, his voice a gravelly rumble that seals the door to the Reformation before the hinges can even groan. The vision of a sovereign, independent England evaporates like mist over the marshes. Thomas Cromwell, watching from the shadows, sees his future as an architect of a new world crumble into dust. The room, once a theater of rebellion, becomes a cathedral of submission. The king's submission to Rome and the empire ensures that the fires of Smithfield will never burn for Catholics, but for the very ideas Henry once toyed with. The trajectory of Western history is violently rerouted, trading the chaos of revolution for the suffocating, velvet peace of an eternal Catholic orthodoxy. The halls of Whitehall no longer echo with the sharp, rhythmic tap of Anne Boleyn's silk slippers. Instead, a suffocating silence descends, heavy as the lead coffins in the vaults of Westminster. And is a ghost before she is a corpse, spirited away in the dead of a humid night, the splash of oars on the Thames the only eulogy for her ambition. There is no trial, no public scandal to feed the vultures of the court, only the low, rhythmic groan of the Traitor's Gate and the metallic scent of damp river stone. She is the first casualty of this tectonic shift, her name already being chiseled from the lintels of Hampton Court by stonemasons working in the flickering orange glow of torches. The king's great matter has been replaced by a great forgetting. Thomas Cromwell stands in the shadows of the gallery, a master architect watching his blueprints curl and blacken in a fire he did not light. His vision of a sovereign England, a bureaucratic island fortress answerable only to itself, dies in its cradle. He is a predator who has lost his scent, his inkhorns dry and his ledgers filled with the useless accounts of a dream that vanished with a single kneeling gesture. The air in the presence chamber is thick with a cloying, oily scent of Mediterranean incense and the abrasive rustle of heavy Spanish wool. Eustace Chapuis moves through the court not as an ambassador, but as a shadow king, his whispers carrying the crushing weight of the Habsburg Empire. The halls are flooded with the crimson robes of papal legates, their voices a low, Latin drone that smothers the English tongue like a thick velvet shroud. This is the pivot point where the king's domestic policy is no longer his own. It is a puppet theater directed from the Vatican and the Escorial. Henry moves through his palace like a wounded beast in a gilded cage, his massive frame casting a distorted shadow against tapestries depicting the triumphs of his ancestors. His predatory energy, once directed at the dismantling of the old world, is now turned inward, festering in the heat of his own submission. The fragile heartbeat of the Reformation has been stilled by the cold, iron hand of geopolitical reality. Every decree is scrutinized by the watchful eyes of the Inquisition's advance guard. Every whim of the king is filtered through the interests of his nephew-in-law, Charles V. The royal household is a hive of Spanish spies, their presence a constant, itching reminder of the price of his throne. The court becomes a theater of performative piety, where the scent of beeswax, candles, replaces the musk of the hunt. Queen Catherine, radiant in her grim vindication, walks with the heavy, measured tread of a saint restored. She is no longer a discarded wife, but the iron pillar upon which the Tudor dynasty now leans. The biological gamble of a male heir remains, but it is now a problem for the Church to solve through pilgrimage and penance rather than defiance. The eraser of the world we know has begun its work, rubbing out the sketches of a maritime empire and replacing them with the rigid geometry of a continental satellite. England is no longer an island. It is a province of the old faith, retreating into a holy, stagnant silence. The bells of Fountains Abbey do not crack under the sledgehammers of reform. Instead, they ring with a resonant, suffocating authority that vibrates through the very soil of Yorkshire. In this reality, the great stone monasteries remain the anchors of the English landscape, their vast libraries preserved not as embers in the wind, but as silent fortresses of dogma. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax, frankincense, and the stale, cold breath of crypts where the bones of saints rest undisturbed. This is the tectonic shift made manifest, a kingdom that refused to break, choosing instead to become a gilded reliquary for an aging faith. Henry, once a storm of golden ambition, is now a spent gale, a predator whose claws have been blunted by the sheer weight of his own submission. He moves through the halls of Hampton Court like a ghost haunting his own life, his face a mask of bloated regret. The biological gamble for a male heir has failed. The womb of Catherine remained the only legitimate vessel, and history has closed that door with a finality that echoes like a tomb. There is no Edward to bring the iconoclasts, no Cranmer to rewrite the liturgy in the common tongue. Instead, the Latin Mass remains a wall of impenetrable sound, a cage of sacred noise that keeps the commoner in a state of perpetual holy awe. The political climate is a frozen sea. In the shadows of the Privy Chamber, Spanish legates move like sleek, black-clad spiders, weaving a web of influence that connects London directly to the Escorial. The pivot point has passed, and England has been tilted irrevocably toward the son of the Habsburgs. When the king finally falls, the transition is not a crisis, but a coronation of destiny. Mary I ascends not as a bitter revolutionary, seeking to undo decades of heresy, but as the seamless continuation of a Catholic monolith. She is an elemental force, not a woman, but a pillar of salt and iron, her eyes fixed on a horizon where the smoke of the heretic's pyre is the only acceptable incense. The fires are indeed lit, but the wood is piled for the Lutheran, the secret reader of Tyndale, and the merchant with forbidden thoughts from the Low Countries. Smithfield is a theater of purification where the burgeoning Reformation is strangled in its crib. This England is the northern fortress of the Counter-Reformation, a jagged cliff against which the waves of northern rebellion break and dissolve. The kingdom is no longer an island. It is an extension of the continent's will, an eraser of the world we know, where the concept of the Englishman is inseparable from the papist. The fragile heartbeat of a sovereign identity has been synchronized with the pulse of Rome, ensuring that the light of the Renaissance is filtered through the stained glass of absolute ecclesiastical obedience. The Thames is thick with the scent of tar, salt, and holy incense, a heavy fog that chokes the breath of the city. The year 1588 arrives not with the thunder of cannons at Gravelines, but with the rhythmic, terrifying thud of Spanish boots on London's cobblestones. This is the eraser of the world we know, where the red-haired ghost of a daughter never born, Elizabeth, haunts only the margins of a history that moved on without her. Because Catherine held her ground at Blackfriars, the fragile heartbeat of the Protestant Reformation was stilled in its cradle. Henry's biological gamble for a male heir resulted only in the icy, devout reign of Mary, a woman who stands as a glacier of tradition, grinding the bones of dissent into the white dust of the cathedral floor. The political air is a stagnant pool, a cold war of whispers behind heavy velvet curtains, where the only currency is loyalty to the Holy See. There is no Globe Theater ringing with the defiant, nationalistic poetry of a rising middle class. Instead, the man from Stratford pens somber, Latinate hagiographies in the shadow of the Inquisition, his genius clipped like the wings of a songbird in a golden cage. The English Renaissance is a muffled thing, a celebration of the eternal and the orthodox rather than the human and the volatile. This is the tectonic shift, the moment the island broke away from its destiny as a seafaring rebel and became the iron fist of the Habsburgs. In the Channel, the Great Armada does not burn. There are no fire ships, no Protestant wind to scatter the invader. Instead, the horizon is a forest of masts, a Spanish wood that finds safe harbor in the mouth of the Medway, greeted by the tolling bells of a city that never learned to be anything but a vassal. The sea dogs, Drake, Hawkins, Raleigh, do not hunt the plate fleets of the New World. They serve them. They are the vanguard, the salt-stained predators of the Catholic king, their sails bearing the crimson cross of Burgundy as they escort gold from the Americas to the vaults of Madrid. History here is a glittering lie, a cage of silence where the English language is a secondary dialect, a tool for prayers and ledgers rather than the fire of empire. This is the pivot point where the trajectory of the West was bent backward into the arms of the Old World, ensuring a future of monolithic stasis. The scent of frankincense and salt spray hangs heavy over the James River, where no Jamestown rises, but rather the fortress mission of San Pedro de Virginia. The atmosphere is thick with the humid copper tang of the Atlantic and the smell of sun-baked adobe. Here, the landscape is a sprawling canvas of the Spanish Main, where the Virgin Queen's name was never whispered, and the Potomac flows beneath the shadow of Baroque steeples. This is the tectonic shift made manifest. The North American continent is no longer a wilderness of dissenting pilgrims, but a structured hierarchy of viceroyalties and holy orders. The sound of the frontier is the rhythmic metallic tolling of bells across the Appalachians, calling a continent to its knees in a single, unified tongue. In the Low Countries, the air is thick with the iron scent of blood and the damp, cloying fog of the North Sea. The Dutch Revolt, once a firebrand of Republican hope, is a guttering candle beneath an armored boot. There is no English gold for the rebels. Instead, the English sea dogs, once the predators of the Spanish treasure fleets, now act as the Habsburgs' hounds. They form a pincer of steel, closing from the west, while the Duke of Alba strikes from the south. The rebellion is not the birth of a nation, but a slow, suffocating execution. The Anglo-Spanish alliance is an elemental force, a crushing glacier that grinds the bones of heresy into the mud of Flanders. The fragile heartbeat of Catherine's defiance in a London courtroom decades ago has pulsed outward, a ripple-turned tsunami that has reshaped the map of the stars. In the salons of Madrid and the palaces of a Catholic London, the world feels like a finished map, a completed puzzle. Knowledge is a curated garden, not a wild forest. The English language, stripped of its Shakespearean fire and King James clarity, survives as a peasant's dialect, a coarse patois spoken in the shadows of Spanish administration. It is the eraser of the world we know, a silent, velvet tide that has washed away the Enlightenment before its first spark could catch. The political tension is a cold, static hum. Diplomats move like shadows through the Escorial, their motives hidden behind the blank masks of religious devotion. There are no rival empires, only rival factions within the same monolith, circling each other like wolves in a cathedral. The sun does not set on this world, but the light it casts is amber and stagnant, trapped in the thick glass of a singular, absolute faith. This is the peace of the tomb, a global empire where the lineage of Catherine and Henry stands as a permanent monument to a marriage that refused to break. The very idea of the individual is a ghost, haunted by the crushing weight of a unified, holy crown. The air in London does not crackle with the ozone of revolution. It hangs thick and sweet with the cloying scent of frankincense and the damp, earthy smell of old stone. In this century of silence, the Thames does not churn with the frantic merchant vessels of a global empire. Instead, it laps lazily against the docks, carrying the monotonous tolling of 1,000 bells from 1,000 steeples that were never torn down. The Great Fire never cleansed the city's crooked streets, and the Great Plague was met with the rhythmic chanting of barefoot friars, rather than the cold, surgical logic of the quarantine. Here, time is a stagnant pool, not a rushing river. The tectonic shift that began when Catherine of Aragon knelt at Blackfriars, her iron will anchoring the Tudor line to the papacy, has reached its final, grinding conclusion. The English Civil War, that bloody forge of modern liberty, is a ghost that never walked. There is no new model army, no regicide of Charles I, no radical leveling of the social order. The monarch sits upon the throne not as a servant of the law, but as the weary, gilded warden of a divine status quo. The king is a predator turned into a decorative gargoyle, his power preserved in amber by the very church he once dreamed of defying. Behind the throne, the shadow of the papal legate looms, a silhouette cast by flickering candles, watching for the slightest flicker of independence. In the universities of Oxford and Cambridge, the heavy oak windows are leaded shut against the wind of inquiry. The scientific revolution is a flickering candle snuffed out by a heavy, velvet glove of ecclesiastical authority. Where Harvey might have mapped the secret channels of the blood, or Newton might have decoded the mathematical heartbeat of the stars, there is only the scratching of pens copying the works of Aquinas. The telescope is a forbidden toy, a glass eye peering into a heaven that the Church has already mapped in ink that will never dry. This is the eraser of the world we know, a timeline where the friction of dissent, the very spark of progress, has been smoothed away by the crushing weight of orthodoxy. The political air is thin and cold, vibrating with the tension of a Cold War fought in the confessional booth. In the corridors of Whitehall, factions do not debate the rights of man. They circle one another like predators in a cathedral, watching for the heresy of doubt. To suggest that the earth moves or that a commoner has a soul independent of the crown is not merely treason. It is a madness that the Inquisition cures with a soft voice and a sharp red iron. The fragile heartbeat of English individualism, once poised to pulse through the veins of the modern world, has been slowed to a near halt, a faint drumbeat lost in the roar of the liturgy. England has become a holy backwater, a quiet, emerald garden tended by monks, while the rest of the world remains locked in a Spanish grip. There is no industrial revolution here. The steam engine is a demonic curiosity, and the mechanical loom is a threat to the God-ordained labor of the poor. The pivot point has led to a peace that feels like a burial. The scars of civil war were avoided, but in their place is the smooth, pale skin of a body that has forgotten how to grow, a kingdom where the sun never sets because the dawn is forbidden to break.